What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Biblical Hitmen. It's me, Steven. I got Jesse in the house. Taylor's not here with us tonight, but joining us yet again is Tim Constantine, host of Sixth Sensory Podcast. Folks, if it's your first time here, we appreciate you, and you want to support our show, hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends. You can also support us on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Spotify. All those will do. But with all that stuff out the way, Tim, welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you again.
Hey guys, happy to be here. Happy to be here again. Last time was fun. Let's do it again. Yeah, Tim Constantine. My show is Sixth Sensory Podcast, spelled out SIX. I'm on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, and yeah, man, that was getting good, fellas. What we were talking about before you hit record. Let's get Stephen. What were you going to say?
Oh man. Oh well, we were getting, so just a little bit for everyone. We had Tim on the show. The first time we had Tim on, we got into the Thule Society, the Nazi occult, and just how everything weird with Hitler and that whole regime, and all the occult practices that were going on with it. You really brought an awesome show for the viewers, man. And we were getting into pretty much what we're going to go over today, but you were talking about oracles and all this stuff. And I remember I read in a book one time that, and this was justified around the same time as the crucifixion of Christ. And this was documented in the, that Greek area there, right? It wasn't like in, the Israel area. It was documented. This was specifically documented in the Greek Empire area. But what's funny is that it cross references with a lot of documents in Israel, right? Because in Israel around that time we have Josephus. There's a bunch of historians that wrote about the crucifixion of Christ, and then they take that time frame and they compare it with the other documents and things written in Greece at that time. And obviously there was a lot of occultists in Greece. There was oracles, there was philosophers. It was like really growing in that area. But one thing that the oracles write down in the same time frame that Christ was crucified is that they had a disconnection for a few years with the channeling entities and all of this stuff. So, because we know that oracles have a connection, they're pretty much channelers and they see the future, kind of remote viewers, all that kind of stuff, right? They're just practicing occultists, and they wrote and they documented that they lost connection with their entities, little g gods, whatever it is, all that stuff.
Interesting.
But,
and I remember you talking about this. Is this like the connection with like the Holy Spirit breaking that bond or something like that?
I think so, and I think it had. I mean, if you think of the whole Bible and the whole story and the crucifixion of Christ, it's like it's the biggest event of the whole story, right? It's the ultimate counter chess move, right? In this chess game between the dark side and the light side, it's constantly going back and forth. And I think the crucifixion of Christ, it erupted and destroyed a lot of things, right? In which they had to, that dark side of things, right? Fallen angels, whatever it is, the bloodlines, they had to like rebuild after that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things Christ did, and where he chose to do things like transfiguration, he chose to do that on Mount Hermon. Very symbolic. That's where these watchers come down to earth and talk about disrupting things. They disrupted everything, and they wanted to, of course, start up a hybrid serpent seed kind of a thing there. But even back to what Christ was doing, even in his crucifixion, there was like extremely heavily symbolic stuff happening there, down to the Golgotha itself, like the place of the skulls. Well, the local legend there is that's where Adam's skull was kept. It's like the grave of Adam, the first man. And when I found out that that's been the local legend there for all these years, I was just like, wow, that's like Christ claiming victory over death for mankind.
Right.
But
That's wild.
rerouting it, right? In a way to where now we have like an eternal life. So, but it's the grave of the first man, and he died on the grave. That's heavily, like, I can't even put into words how symbolic that is.
Right. And I think another wild thing too It's funny you brought that up, right? The Golgotha, right? The what is it called? The land of the skull or something, or the mountain of the skull or
Mountain
something
of the
like
skull,
that.
place of the
Something
skull.
like
Yeah.
that, right? Don't quote me on that. But when David took out Goliath, David cut Goliath's head off and he took it back to Israel. And it's supposed, in the story that the head of Goliath was also buried in that area. Thus it's called like, the skull, right? The head of the skull. And I know like you can get depictions of a skull that looks like it's in the mountain based off of like topography and all that, which is wild.
That's
I
that's
found
crazy.
that I
Well,
found that interesting too.
yeah, I think it's telling that. Well, we were talking before we recorded about Washington and Jefferson and how there was more of an occult influence to the beginning of this country, and I agree with that. I want to get into that later, but like, um, Christ was choosing to go to places that were heavily
Mm,
ingrained with the occult
mm,
in general. So, I mean, he went to the most occult place in the Middle East, in my opinion, which was Mount Hermon. I mean, you got the Grotto of
Right.
Pan there.
Yep.
You've got all kinds of a some sort of a tunnel to the underworld was said to be there. So he went there and did his thing. But like, there's the facade of Christianity too that we were talking about over here. That is like Jefferson, Washington, and like rulers over here, they seem to claim to be Christian, but when we peel back the layer and see what their true beliefs are, it's not there, and we were talking about, so this whole Delphic thing, and I when you said that, I pulled this up. These are some of my notes on Jefferson. He was talking in letters about how Proverbs in the Bible was influenced by Egyptian mystics, and in his opinion, of course. And he seemed to think that these Delphic maxims were just as good as Christian morals. And Delphi was, of course, this hub, and they're one of these occult hubs of Greece. Um, from what I can tell, those maxims were like procured by 7 sages who were the witches of Delphi. And that's what
Right.
Jefferson was seemingly more interested in. So, and I'm starting to see similar stuff with George Washington as well, which, I'll get into today if it comes up and all that. But
Right.
there's
Well,
some sketchy stuff and like Jefferson, one more thing was he was friends with this Lafayette guy. And Lafayette was very much into the occult and was friends with a big occultist of the day. And Washington knew about it. Jefferson knew about it. They didn't seem to have any problems with like being associated with actual out there in the open occultists.
yeah, it's crazy too understanding the just the people that established this country 1776 and why they came up with the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all this. And I think it was all in fabrication to protect themselves as occultists, and they had this facade of Christianity. And some people may be listening right now and highly offended at that, but when you really dig into it and you see the symbolism and the
yeah.
groups that they were a part of, right? Like Benjamin Franklin, for example, he was a part of the Hellfire Club, right? The Hellfire Club was a satanic club, right? And then 200 years later, from that time of 1776 or early 1800s, specifically in 1998, they actually found dead bodies buried at underneath Benjamin Franklin's home
I think it
that
was
he
in
lived in
London,
around
right?
like 1857 or something like this, right? I don't know exactly where it was,
I think it was
but
London.
I think he had multiple homes, but this was just in
Right.
one of his homes. And it's so funny, right? We see in the movie Stranger Things, right? For example, there's a Hellfire Club, right? And the Hellfire Club is they're the main characters of the show, right? And we know that there's an inversion with things
There's
in
an inversion.
films, always an inversion in things. And you know what I found very funny is that there were 4 adults found buried underneath Franklin's home, but then there were 6 children. And what's funny is in Stranger Things,
Whoa.
the Hellfire Club was 6 children,
6 kids. Yeah.
6 kids. So
I remember you sent me that
I
the other
don't
day. I'm
know if
like,
they
ooh.
threw that in there just to
Creepy,
Yeah,
dude.
there's a lot of
just
stuff encoded in that show. And just when that show was when that show was at its peak, everybody was during the middle of the pandemic, everybody was watching, it was after 2020,
Right.
but like, I just remember thinking like, there was an episode I watched and it was the episode where they unveiled that song. They brought that 80s song back, the Running Up That
Oh,
Hill song. And
yes. I know what you're talking about.
I'm like, everybody's watching this right
Oh,
now.
yeah. Right.
Everybody is, because everybody's out of work, and like everybody's going to be playing that song. I just had that feel,
Interesting.
and it's funny because that song was played at an opening Olympic ceremony back in 2012, I think it was, where they had what I would call a ritual to bring in the whole COVID thing altogether. It was the occult Olympic ceremony where they had a big Grim Reaper with like a
I
syringe looking
forgot
thing.
about that,
You remember
dude.
there was like
I'm
people
like,
dressed up like demons, wear like black cloaks, chasing around kids around hospital
I
beds.
completely forgot
yes,
about that. That was so
yes,
weird.
weird, dude.
That song had fallen into obscurity after the 80s sometimes. Kate Bush. They brought it back briefly for the opening ceremony where they have the hospital beds, the Grim Reaper, all the symbolism for things to come with the COVID thing. The song goes back into obscurity. When do you see it again? In COVID. It pops up in the middle of Stranger Things. And like
That's
there's
so
all
crazy.
kinds of stuff like that with that show, man. Like
Yeah,
they
Tony
are
Merkel. Tony Merkel loves that show. He brought it up a lot, and
I like the show too, actually.
I never got into.
It's actually one of the only shows I've actually watched.
I should watch it. I can't do shows. I don't know what it is about me. I just can't. I love documentaries and movies, but hey, going back to Benjamin Franklin, in the basement of Benjamin Franklin's former London home at 36 Craven Street, human remains were found in the 90s. And discovery, skeleton remains of at least 15 individuals, some whom were children, found in a pit beneath the garden of the London house where Franklin resided for 16 years. Woo.
So
right.
let me offer you something here. What I think might be going on here. We're talking about Franklin, Jefferson, George Washington, and just to speak to something like, yeah, maybe some people listening haven't considered that the Protestant thing is a facade and the Christian thing is a facade. Keep an open mind. I'll try to lay some of that out today. It doesn't mean that there aren't Christians in America, because we're here and we're strong and we're not worried about, like, some of us aren't worried about R's and D's. Like, we're worried about doing the right thing. That being said, I think when we're talking about these guys like Jefferson and Washington and Franklin, we're talking about rulers being used by outside forces and sometimes otherworldly forces. Ruling by proxy. Concepts of ruling by proxy. Something else behind the scenes is like pulling these guys like puppets by the strings, right? And I'll give an example here. Something I found recently. There are some ancient writings associated with Nebuchadnezzar from the Bible, and all this is documented in a book called Ages and Chaos 2. That book contains a story about Nebuchadnezzar being raised in the temple of Ishtar. There's all these interesting writings that Nebuchadnezzar apparently wrote that were found. And he's talking about, my lady Ishtar helped me in battle. And when I made it to Egypt, I gave offerings to her, the goddess. So he had all this love and veneration and admiration for Ishtar. He would consult with her. He even talked about how she would come to his wife in dreams and, like, give them messages and give them direction. Well, this is what I call ruling by proxy. George Washington also said a goddess came to him one night and spoke of a plan for him, and this is documented. And he wasn't saying it was in a dream either. He said a goddess came to him one night. It was very real to him. It shook him up. And she was calling him the child of the Republic and saying, we're going to do big things here. This was like at the beginning of what was going to become the American Empire. Washington is a spearhead for the American Empire that was coming at that point, right? And I would suggest, honestly, guys, I would suggest that it's the same entity. I'm going to take it a step deeper here. Same entity showing up at the start of all these different empires is the same one that came to Washington. I'd say she came to John Dee in May of 1587. That's the beginning of the British Empire. All that's documented. It's called the Daughters of Fortitude. John Dee got a message from a divine feminine goddess figure that he wrote down. He was scrying. It's called the Daughters of Fortitude, and it reads just like the stuff you get from Ishtar when she's talking to all these other people throughout the ages. Even a Thunder Perfect Mind from 1946 Nag Hammadi Library, divine feminine. It's Ishtar, right? In my opinion. So you see her showing up at the beginning of the Sumerian Empire too, in the Epic of Gilgamesh. You see her, of course, in Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar. You see her here with Washington, and I'll keep. I mean, I could keep going, but I'll cap it off there. But what happened here is Nebuchadnezzar was granted kingship and power from an entity, Ashtar, Ishtar, Inanna, Astarte, whatever you want to call her, and they had a pact. And part of their pact, Stephen, we talked about this earlier, that Nebuchadnezzar was going to transmute and become a god. Because a lot of these guys were trying to do this, like Nimrod. In the Bible, it says Nimrod became Gibberine. I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
It wasn't
right.
just Nimrod trying to do this. Actually, that Nag Hammadi library that I mentioned, that was procured by Ashurbanipal, I think. Maybe he had his own library. But anyway, Ashurbanipal was trying to do the same thing. He was trying to alchemically turn into something else. Like you see Enoch. They say Enoch turned into Metatron, right? These kings were trying to do this. Nebuchadnezzar was trying to do this, and he was using this relationship with this otherworldly entity that they called Ishtar to get there. They had a pact, right?
Interesting.
Right. And I find it interesting too that there's this apotheosis ritual that our nation goes through every 4 years, right? The apotheosis ritual is basically, that when you come into power as a king, that you die, you go into the underworld, but then the spirit of the one divine king comes into you, and then you depart into the heavens with the rest of the gods. And you can see this illustrated with our Capitol building. It's actually called the Apotheosis of George Washington. It's in the Capitol building. I mean, and when you look at Washington at itself and how it's all laid out, you can tell just by how the streets are, built. And when you look at a satellite view over Washington, D.C., the whole entire structure of the transportation system on the roads, it's a big pentagram, right? You've got Moloch the Owl, which is, at the at the White House, and everything is looked down at a satellite view to really get a good picture of all this stuff. There's the pyramid with the eye at the top. All this stuff is really there. And what's funny, because what we were mentioning earlier, right? There's always this facade of Christianity behind these occultists, especially the really big ones, the ones that matter. And I think it's of satanic nature, because Satan's always been doing that, right? If we look at the Pharisees and we look at Christ walking amongst the Pharisees, Satan was, hidden behind the Pharisees in a way. But they were coming off like they were God's people, right? So it's the same cycle of things, as we move throughout time. And I think we're seeing it with Christianity today, in our day today. And this is going to hurt a lot of people with Trump, RFK, and all these other people that are in office today. They are talking really good things. They're talking great things, and they're saying that they are Christians, but I think it's a facade.
I think it's a facade too, and I'm just trying to shine light on some of these areas of the facade where people don't go much. Like, put a little light in the dark corners, and because I mean that's where my research goes a lot. I don't really, have my hands on the wheels anymore with the research. I just kind of go where it goes, right? But
Nice.
there's so much there I wanted to talk about. I'm glad you brought up the Apotheosis of George Washington, because I meant to actually bring that up, like that painting where he's elevated into some sort of god, like
Right.
I don't know. Like it's
72 gods around
Yeah.
him.
yeah,
Right?
like
He's
that's
got one hand up, one hand down,
that's
Baphomet.
what these guys were trying to do. That's Gilgamesh,
Right.
Ashurbanipal, Nebuchadnezzar, Nimrod. This is an old ancient practice. This goes back to an old Canaanite cult, I think. I'll get into that later, but like,
Okay.
because that's, just remind me to get to it if I don't get to it, because I do want to touch on it at some point today. But like, and I'm sorry, like maybe some of the stuff we talked about before the podcast is merging with the beginning of the podcast here. But so
Mhm.
I don't remember if this was off camera or not,
Happens.
but you brought up Lucifer, right, and all that. Now I just want to throw this in because I found this too, and I think this ties into like what you laid out nicely there, the layout of DC, all the symbolism, all the divinatory, symbolic, what's the word I'm looking for here? Geomancy type stuff. That was all put there on purpose, and it all goes back to this goddess worship. So I found this book called Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. And I promise I'm not going to talk about Ishtar this whole entire show, guys, but I'm going to throw this one more thing in here. This book contains an old origin story for Ishtar. It says, an egg of wondrous size was said to have fallen from heaven into the river Euphrates. I'd say it might have been an asteroid personally, but the egg was washed ashore. The doves settled upon the egg and it hatched. Doves are associated with Ishtar, by the way. Then out came from the egg Venus, who afterwards was called the Syrian goddess. And Lucifer is worshipped as Venus, and Ishtar is worshipped as Venus. So I don't want to break people's minds here, but Ishtar is very Luciferian. So at the end of the day, we're back at, I think, Luciferianism, right? You have these entities had an androgynous form. Again, I don't want to break people's minds with that. That's another story, another topic for another day, how you could break down how there is an androgynous thing to some of these entities. They had a male form and a female form. But either way, the foundation of this country was set up with goddess worship in mind, and it goes deeper than goddess worship, of course. There's the cult of Rephaim that I'll talk about, and the cult of Kos. I might not be able to get to that today, but it goes back to Washington because he knew about all this stuff, right? And there's another goddess I found involved with these guys, Astraea. The Astraea rabbit hole goes deep. So there are turn of the century grimoires that show this goddess Astraea standing over a globe and pointing directly at the USA. I'm like, what is this? So I looked into it, and it turns out Astraea is actually, or also, I should say, the Virgo, the constellation Virgo. Virgo is August to September 23rd. The Constitution was signed September 17th, 1787 in Virgo. Then in Astraea, right? Then Astraea shows up in the official commemorative government art in a piece by John Norman that came out 1784. Maybe it came out right before the Constitution, actually, but that was a few years after, sorry, because in the art it shows an engraving of what appears to be Astraea deciding on where on earth she's going to make her residence while she's holding a picture of George Washington. So I know this is deep stuff, right? But Washington chose Virginia for the capital. Virginia is code for virgin goddess, and Astraea kind of fits the bill for that. She was said to be like the last of the immortals to live with humans during the Golden Age. And the legend is that she would return to Earth and bring with her a utopian age that they called a golden age, of which she represents. So I know that's all super, super deep stuff, but it's deeply intertwined with the beginning of our country, with the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And
and Tom Horn talks about this, right? He talks about the secret destiny of America. written by Manly P. Hall, right? Manly P. Hall, a 33rd degree Freemason, someone who was wrote a lot of books, right, pertaining to the knowledge he knew of the occult and his practices, and just matter of fact, the ciphering of the symbols in our country, and why our country was built, because there's an agenda to come out of it, right? And I think that the United States could possibly be like the throne of the antichrist, right? If you think about it, because what were we talking about before, right? The whole facade, the inversions, all that stuff. What nation are we? We're a Christian nation,
Right.
but the people running it are not
Are
Christians. You
not.
see where I'm
Right.
kind of going with this? And the symbolism really kind of shows all of it. You get the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, right? The new order of things, and that it's a building block process to get to where they want to be at. And I think the egg symbolism also plays a big role in this. I think the egg symbolism connects with the phoenix symbolism, where it's this rising out of its old self. It's the apotheosis stuff we've been talking about, you know?
Yeah, yeah. There was a secret society predates all this too. It predates the country itself. These guys were already in a secret society before they signed these documents and established America. There was a fraternal order of ancient bloodlines that converged over here during and after the Revolutionary War, and they started the Society of the Cincinnati, and then they started the country itself. You know, the question I have, this is where I'm at, is were they trying to merge with the bloodline that came before them, who built the mounds?
Hmm. Oh, interesting.
This is how deep this goes. Because
I mean,
I think Jefferson and Washington both were the personal handlers of Lewis and Clark and these
wow.
the first explorers.
Wow.
They knew all about the mounds that were being dug up. There wasn't the mound builders. I know that's like a huge topic, but if I could just boil it down to what I think was going on there, those were Canaanite Phoenician people that were coming over here.
Hmm.
And there
Interesting,
was an
man.
ancient Canaanite Phoenician cult over here associated with the mounds, associated with ancient cities that our cities
Right.
are built on top of. Like
Wow.
we were talking about Kentucky earlier, right? Before the show, Kentucky, Louisville was built on top of an ancient city. There's
Hmm.
an old wall. Nashville was built on top of an ancient city and an old mound site. Cincinnati was built on an ancient city that these mound builders built. Pagan cult mound builders built Cincinnati. Washington wanted the capital to be there originally because it had 7 hills like Rome. Then they found that DC had 7 hills like Rome too, so they went with
Right.
DC and Virginia for some reason. But they were looking at, my point is they were looking at scouting out these places where this cult used to be.
I think you're onto something there.
Yeah,
I
that's
really do,
interesting.
because for example, right, you look at how the Federal Reserve right Act was passed in 1913, just after the Titanic incident, which is, there's a lot of connections with that as well. But
Yeah.
in Jekyll Island, right, which is in, off the coast of Georgia, uh the Rockefellers owned a home there, and the home was built on top of a burial site, a
Yep.
sacrificial site of the ancient tribes that used to be there before them, right? But there's always this connection with the occult and these sacred lands that they know about. It's almost ritualistic
That
or
tribe
something.
was
For
is
sure.
exactly what I'm talking about. They were probably remnants of the mound builders because they were giants.
Mm.
Like the museum people down there at Jekyll Island who have the Rockefeller Museum, they've got at one point they had 8.5 foot skeletons in there.
Wow.
People have gone in there and seen this. It's not like this is real. Those that tribe was practicing old Canaanite like child sacrifice and other various practices.
Jeez.
Rockefeller knew about this because there was an old French colony that came in there in the early 1500s, I guess it was, and got so spooked by this tribe. And they're like, Nephilim, like, vile practices that the French colony moved to Florida. They went to, and they started Augustus, or was it Augustine, the oldest city in the nation. The oldest city in the nation was founded by these people who
Yeah.
were running away from these 8 foot native Canaanite people. And I'm saying they're Canaanite because I've seen all that in my research, right? Like I can't prove
Mhm.
that, but their practices were definitely come down from this older order, this older occult order that's Canaanite, Nephilim, Phoenician, Amorite, all that. The native people over here who weren't like giants, what we would call Native Americans, they were more Hebrew in their practices, which is another rabbit hole.
Interesting.
Wow.
The giants were like Canaanite in their practices, and this all goes back to older stuff, man. Like there's remnants of occult and cult activity found over here all over the place. When you look at some of these like forbidden archaeological findings over here that people don't want you to know about, you see they were pulling out of the mounds. They were pulling magic wands, crystal
What?
balls.
What?
Uh,
Wow.
there were weird obelisks found over here, mummies found over here. I saw a picture of a mushroom-tipped magic wand, a sorcerer wand that came out of a mound over here. The thing about this is like the mummies disappeared. The crystal balls all disappeared as well. But these were all associated with the giants. That's a telltale sign to me because anytime you see the giants involved, because we were pulling giants out of these mounds,
Right.
that's an indicator that they're part of this old cult. And I mean, Washington knew about this. Washington himself diaried that he saw giant skeletons being dug up out of a mound. They were
Mhm.
constructing Fort Loudon, and Washington went over there and actually saw them dig up the giants. So a lot of this stuff is missing. Let me loop this back around to Washington one more time. Again, the Society of Cincinnati. It looks like those obelisks. There was one at Serpent Mound. There was also one at the tip of Montauk Point, where all that weird stuff happens, the Montauk Project and all that. Those obelisks went missing, and this gets into this guy named Putnam. Putnam was like one of their establishment archaeologists who I'm pretty sure was part of a nationwide cover up of the true history of North America,
Hmm.
right? Because
Interesting.
Putnam was born into this powerful group, aka the Society of Cincinnati, that was started by George Washington himself. So they sent Putnam to Serpent Mound, and they only let him do the excavations there. And later we find out that they were pulling giants out of the Serpent Mound as well.
Wow.
What happened to those, right? It got totally got like covered up. The obelisk is missing, everything, all this stuff's missing. That's why this history is virtually unknown. It goes
Yeah.
back
And
to Washington and the Society of Cincinnati, man.
yeah, I brought this up. I brought this up last show with Donut. Shout out to Donut. Go check him out on the real Donut. Uh, but with all this talk with the bloodlines, giants, Nephilim, I think that a lot of this does play into a global leader that's to come from this bloodline, right? Because they have been practicing this for a very long time. Osiris, Apollo, Nimrod, all that stuff. When you look at the Bible narrative, there's a bloodline of that they're represented by, that almost like they identify by. And what's interesting is in Manly P. Hall's book, Secret Destiny of America, check this out. It says, he says this,
By
the
the
out,
way, that I
yeah.
cite that book for a lot of this research, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Oh, nice.
Just
So,
want to
so
say.
also, yeah. So he says the outcome of the secret destiny is a world order ruled by a king with supernatural powers. This king was descended of a divine race. That is, he belonged to the order of the Illumined. For those who come to a state of wisdom, then belong to a family of heroes, perfected human beings. So maybe kind of the reason why they chose America, and why they're hiding all of this stuff, right? With these findings, these mounds, and these sites that would only prove the biblical narrative to be even more credible. um, I find it interesting now that you've brought all this up, because maybe the ancient civilization that was here was Nephilim. Maybe it was, the
Well,
giants, and that tainted bloodline, right? That we kind
yeah.
of always cover.
Right.
It was, and you kind of have to like cover a ton of history to kind of lay this out and show people that the Nephilim were coming over here. I mean, I would just say the biggest indicator for me is Isle Royal in the Great Lakes. There's tons of copper missing from there.
Mm,
And then we found all these Phoenician artifacts. We found out the Phoenicians were coming over here and sailing up, literally sailing up the Mississippi, up and down the Mississippi.
right.
They were part of this the commerce of this copper trade, right? They were leaving their little stone, like if you look at the Wabanzi stone, there were a couple of these found. There's one down at a bar in Florida right now. They built the bar, this patio, they built a patio for this bar around this stone. And what it is a big giant stone, and it's got a little indentation in the top for your sacrifice.
Oh,
That was
wow.
and they found one right up uh in where basically downtown Chicago is, where the Chicago River meets the Great Lakes.
Oh, dude.
They found one of these stones there. It's got a face on it. It's got a very particular certain type of face on it that indicates that it was a sacrificial stone. Why did they have it there?
What?
Because that was their last stop. They were getting out. They were making an offering for safe passage down the Mississippi so they could go back over across the Atlantic.
Right. Going
So,
back to the, sorry to cut you off, going back to the finding all of these giants. And I think Abraham Lincoln has a story of him finding giants too, I think. I could be wrong, but
no, he
I'm
does.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm like we hear about how the Smithsonian is like this cover up op that is associated with stealing these bones and hiding them from everybody. And I'm like, why? So I Googled, I'm like, okay, who founded the Smithsonian? Well, it's James Smithson. Well, guess what? He was a London Freemason and a member of the craft. And
Uh-huh.
like, oh, not surprising. That is just so crazy, man.
Yeah,
Anyways,
man.
I want to
Well,
throw that tidbit out there.
well, that's what it is. And like beyond the Wabansi stone and some of these other artifacts, just to finish that, like we can tell that Canaanites, Phoenicians, even the Minoans were coming over here. And I think they were mining that copper. So they were here and they
Hmm.
definitely had Nephilim in their mix. That's why we're pulling giants out of the mountains in the first place.
Wow.
But yeah,
Jeez.
Smithsonian knew about this as well. They really did facilitate a cover up. When I first started getting into this, I thought that this was bonkers, man. I thought giants, what? That didn't happen. I was like
Mm,
Smithsonian cover up. I didn't think any of that was legit. Now I know because I've gone in and seen the Smithsonian's own documents. Uh, One in particular came out in 1880. It was written by John Wesley Powell, and it was his 1880 report to the Smithsonian. He was working for the Bureau of Ethnology at the time, and he talks about how they're not going to show certain things.
mm,
And it's right out there in the open. I mean, and they were part of this is all this is being. If you brought up the guy who found the Smithsonian, who's a Freemason, a lot of this was being fueled by this Darwin naturalist type of thinking as well. And yeah, I think they had a big problem with the Bible and specifically the giants mentioned in the Bible.
mm.
But my biggest question here in my research was like, why did they build on the mounds though? Why did they put our major cities on the mountains? Why did they put our major cities on these older pagan sites? I'll throw in another example. St. Louis. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to St. Louis, but downtown, they've got a little park there with these big, huge arches.
Right.
Look into the construction of that park. They were leveling mounds. The whole place is on an ancient site. All downtown St. Louis.
Wow.
They built Cincinnati's the same way. Columbus, Ohio, same way. Chillicothe, Ohio, the same way. Nashville, same way. Asheville. They built all these cities on ancient sites that had mounds. and some sort of pagan cult-like activity going on. And I think if you really want to get down into the nitty-gritty of it and find out what was going on with this cult, you've got to look at Serpent Mound in Ohio, where one of the obelisks went missing. There were giants buried there. Those bones are missing. There was a picture that surfaced a couple years ago of a giant that was pulled out of Serpent Mound that was 7 foot tall, missing from the knees down. So it would have been taller than 7 foot. And
Dude.
Putnam doesn't put that in his report. Putnam says, "Oh no, they were 6 foot." You could tell he's just, that's pretty tall for the ancient world still, but like you could tell he was capping it off. But the body of the snake itself for Serpent Mound, you guys know Serpent Mound, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody at home, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it. Please look at Serpent Mound. The body of the snake itself was covered in a type of crystal called dolomite. That's missing as well. But dolomite, it's interesting. Dolomite can look like scales. So imagine Serpent Mound from an aerial view would have glistened like a big dragon in the sun, right? And then it had this obelisk in the middle of the serpent. So the serpent has its mouth around what looks like to be an egg, right? In the middle of that egg was an obelisk, an ancient obelisk. Apparently they took it out because it was getting struck by lightning all the time. And I would say that was by design. They had it. The shamans had it set up to metaphysically charge the whole place.
Where is this at? Where is this at again?
Ohio, I think, right?
Ohio.
Okay, that's right.
Up northwest from Chillicothe.
Is this near like where Mothman sightings are?
No, Mothman's on the East Coast, I think.
Well, Ohio is right there on the. So you've got Point Pleasant, and then there's the Ohio River.
Okay, yeah.
One side of Point Pleasant is West Virginia. The other side is Ohio.
Okay.
And yeah, there's some association there, but it'll take me too long to break that down. But yeah, there is some Point Pleasant association. But the
I didn't
best
realize it was that close. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's not super close, but it's in the same state. Basically, what you have with Point Pleasant is another one of these locations that was built on top of an older ancient site. Because if you go down, the next stop down the Ohio River is a place called Proctorville. It's right below Point Pleasant. And I saw in old articles when they were building Proctorville, there was what did they call it? There were ancient ruins there, irrigation ruins and like old buildings. And there was an ancient city there, an ancient temple there as well in Proctorville. And that's right below Point Pleasant. So my theory is that Point Pleasant was also built on one of these old pagan sites where people were living and practicing shamanic type stuff. And the whole place is probably cursed because the ground is cursed because they were infusing witchcraft into the ground essentially. And I know this sounds crazy, but let me just throw this in. Maybe this will make it all make sense. Serpent Mound, right? Who built it? There's context clues here that are very interesting. There's also a Serpent Mound up in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
There's one over in Seattle, Washington.
Where's that in Ontario? It's up in Canada, though.
Yeah, it's on a peninsula out in the middle of a lake.
Okay, wow.
I don't remember.
Jeez.
But I can tell you afterwards. I'll have to look in my notes and find the exact location. But when you look at the one in Ontario and when you look at the one here in Ohio, they seem to be modeled after the Serpent Mound that's in Bashan in the Middle East. Now, you'll know Bashan, it was associated with King Og of Bashan in the Bible. He was a Nephilim giant. He was also Rephaim. It's interesting. Moses identified Og as a remnant of the Rephaim. That's Deuteronomy 3:13.
Right.
In fact, the land of Bashan was also associated with the Rephaim, so much so that it was called the land of Rephaim. So Serpent Mound, this whole thing goes back to the Middle East and to this cult of Rephaim and giants.
Everything always goes back to the Bible.
It goes back to the Bible. Dude, just goes back. I've been saying Canaanite Phoenicians a lot in this show because I do believe that that's what it is. I'm being very specific, but if I was to be very broad, I would just say giant tribe of people out of the Middle East. That's where all this this comes from. And even Serpent Mound, even some of the dating coincides where the giant tribes were being kicked out of the land of Canaan by Joshua and Caleb. And they would have loved to come over to a place like, North America. It all lines up. And like the word Rapha, I looked into that because I wanted to learn more about this group of people. And the word Rapha refers to people who are giant in stature or departed spirits in the afterlife.
Hmm.
So I looked more into that. In some of the old Canaanite Rephaim texts included in the Ugaritic text, the Rephaim seem to actually be these grandparent ancestral king spirits that could be called upon and summoned and channeled by the giants.
Oh.
That's what they were doing in their Canaanite temples, like the Temple of El. They were calling upon their ancestral spirit. So this really is a cult. And I've been calling it the cult of Rapha, an old Canaanite cult. And I think they were over here. And I think they had something going on where they believed in order to get eternal life, they had to receive deification from their ancestors. This loops right back into that stuff that I sprinkled in about Ishtar earlier and the divine feminine, who may have been helping them in the process, helping them to deify, like what Nebuchadnezzar was trying to do. He seemed like he had a pact with Ishtar because he wanted to become godlike. He didn't want to die like a mortal. He wanted to deify. And they thought to do that, you had to have help from beyond. You had to have either an Ishtar or one of your Rephaim ancestral giant spirits, like Star Wars, man. Like would the Jedis die and they come back in like a spirit form and help you out? That's
Yes.
what this is
Yes.
for real.
Yes.
And so it's like, did the people who followed this sorcerer religion of the Rephaim build Serpent Mound here as a shamanic site? I think so.
I think so too. I think there's always a push whenever there's a cult going on. I think there's always a push to alchemicalize yourself, right? It's always like this transformation from your original state
Apotheosis.
to that apotheosis, that divinity, that deification. And you're right, man. I think Nimrod had something to do with it. I think that also the all the kings of the earth at some
I'm
point.
telling you, man, Ashurbanipal was trying to do this too. I just now recently found that out. Not to cut you
Hmm,
off, but you're absolutely right, man. And like my question recently going through all this material again has been, was George Washington and all those elites, all those rich guys that came over here. Well, George Washington was already here, but a lot of his buddies who helped start the Society of Cincinnati came over from Europe somewhere. There were a lot of them were royal families. They were bloodline families. I'm not joking when I say that these were bloodline people who started this country. Were they trying to link up with the bloodline cult of the Canaanites that came here before them? And I think that you nailed it earlier, Stephen, when you brought up the Jekyll Island thing. That's the link. That's one of the links. That's the Temecula tribe that was there. 8-foot natives. Somehow Rockefeller knows about this and builds his house right on top of their altar, the Temecula altar. And in that Jekyll Island Museum, they literally have pictures of the Temecula giant Indians holding up babies by the ankles with a machete, engaged in child sacrifice. And the old altar for it, Rockefeller built his house directly on top of. That's where they had the secret meeting to establish the Federal Reserve. They built our money system on top of this. They used it for everything. That's the link.
I mean,
That's literally.
goodness, they built our country off of occult practice. They built the Federal Reserve off of occult practice. I mean, what do you really think is their plan, right?
Um, the Nazis were worried about this too. They were worried about the bloodline thinning out and like going obscure because they believed they were part of an equally mystical sort of bloodline that goes way back to like Anunnaki watchers, you know, the Native Americans called them the sky people. It's in every culture where our Mount Hermon event that we talked about earlier. That's the version that I stick to. It's the version you'll find in the Bible, Genesis 6. The Watchers come down, they take wives, they work out pacts with the men of earth. They're like, we'll give you technology, you give us your daughter, and we can strengthen our bloodline through the humans. So all goes back to Genesis 3:15 and the serpent seed. And I think God actually allowed them to go through with it, although he did punish them later, but he did allow them to go through with it, almost as if it's, I'm going to be very careful here, almost as if like he was like, yeah, go ahead. I'm going to fight fair. You can you can strengthen your serpent seed bloodline down here. I'm going to strengthen the seed of Eve. And,
Right.
But anyways, Nazis seem to be worried about that too. I think, to answer your question, I think it's all about preserving that bloodline and more just diabolical world takeover stuff from
I
there.
find that interesting what you just said, preserving the bloodline, and I think you're absolutely right. And people would be like, oh, it's deeper than that. Well, if you think about it, God also preserved his bloodline. Why? Because Christ needed to be born through it. And so what I'm thinking is, what's the inversion of that? And again, like a topic lately on the show has been, revelation. It's just kind of just how things just have fallen into place. But I can see Satan and the fallen angels just working throughout this cosmic timeline, trying to preserve their bloodline so that Satan can come in the flesh at some point in time, aka antichrist, whatever, right? Because we know it's Christ comes through the Seth lineage, and now it seems like the antichrist is going to come through the lineage of Cain, right? And we can see that from Genesis 3:15.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely, yeah. So like, I hope I didn't throw too much at everybody. Like, I know this is a lot. I don't even know, like, this is such a big story that I'm chipping away at. I just had to like dive right into it with you guys. I don't know a better
That's
place to
great.
start than where we did today, but like, obviously what we're talking about is linking up very well. And actually at this point, I'm just bouncing off of what you guys are saying anyway. But I want to go back to this giant thing for just a second and this bloodline, because I think that's what people have a hard time with. Because I know I did, is thinking, there weren't really giants. Come on. Well, go look up Dr. Don Dragu. He worked for the Carnegie Museum. He found one in West Virginia and documented it properly. He went through all the scientific method stuff and documented the whole. There's a lot of guys like that who did that too. That's my point. Like, you can go back, if you really want to look, you can go back and see and validate that there really were giants, and they really were in high abundance over here, especially in this Ohio River Valley region. This from Tennessee to Kentucky to Ohio to West Virginia, all up into the part of Pennsylvania. They were all the way up in New York too. So just this whole Appalachian region had them. So one of the things I found taking this back to the Bible was 2 Samuel 21:16, where you have a giant named Ishbi-Benob. And Ishbi-Benob means his seat in the high place. He takes his seat in the high place. And, we know from the Bible that the high places were associated with mediumship. But there's more to his name. I heard some other researchers that break down that Ishbi Benohov, or they pronounce it differently. Ishbi or Yishbi means son of the medium necromancer. Because they take the Benobi and they say it's actually spelled Yishbi Ben Ov. Ov is a medium. It was also used in the Bible to describe the witch of Endor. So that would mean that this giant, who was Canaanite, was a son of a necromancer who was associated with mediumship and all that. And he was a descendant of Rapha. So I'm thinking, oh, he's in this cult, and his name is actually reflecting that, reflecting some of the practices. So I think anytime you see mounds, ancient sites associated with giants, associated with, you know, this group back in the day that God wanted Caleb and Joshua to root out, well, they didn't get all of them. Some of them came over here and found sanctuary over here. When you look at these giants, you're looking at, in my opinion, you're looking at this ancient Canaanite cult of Rapha now. And I'm calling it the cult of Rapha. I don't know. That's just my thing, but that's how I'm calling it. But like even Proverbs 9, great passage. Um, Proverbs 9 describes a lady in a city who has a house that's basically a portal to spirits. It's like a doorway to the dead. And it says she lives in the highest point of the city, right? So, and I started looking at all these Canaanite temples, and they're all that. They're all built on the highest point of the city, dealing with, and what they were doing there was getting in touch with these ancestral spirits. So I don't know, man, like so many dots were like connected for me when I was looking into this. They did it through the kings too. Like that's a lot of this bloodline thing was, so they were trying to get in touch with a panel of ancestral entities. We call them Nephilim spirits as well, who behind the scenes are trying to rule over earth through mankind. And they
Right.
did it with the kings then, and they're doing it with the politicians now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's wild. Brother, you're making some great connections, man. And if people are lost a little bit, just go back, rewatch the episode. It all kind of hits a little harder the second time you kind of come around these topics, man. And I think that, um,
There's
I
a
think,
great example of this, and I'll tell you about it in a minute when
mhm.
you're done. It's another biblical example of the
Well, go
king.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so like if you look at Ezekiel 28, King Hiram, um,
Hmm.
let's see, he was Phoenician, right? So he's a part of this whole Canaanite Phoenician thing. I do think he was an occultist. I think he was given occultist tips to Solomon actually because he was friends with King Solomon, and I think he was in touch with and controlled by one of these grandparent Rephaim spirits, and I do think that that's laid out in Ezekiel 28 because it talks about him. Let me see if I can find it here. In a way,
And Phoenician is Greek.
well, some of the
Uh,
Greek cities would go on to become like Carthage.
mhm.
That was settled by Phoenicians.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's hard to explain, but yes, it was almost like there was a merging of people there.
It's not originally African. Am I right?
Carthage,
No, no, no.
Let's see.
Phoenician.
uh, no, they were near Tyre, which is right up above Israel.
Okay.
Yes.
There,
Yes.
it's from the
Okay.
It's
Mediterranean.
basically that southern, uh, like southern Europe, pretty much, and
Okay.
North African, southern Europe, North African little area, coastal areas there. Interesting. Okay.
Um, in the Ezekiel, oh, speaking of Tyre, you know that's what this passage is called, a prophecy against the king of Tyre. It's talking about Hiram here. Um, the son of the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, say to the ruler of Tyre, this is what the Lord says. So this is a message meant to be directly from God to Hiram. In the pride of your heart, you say, I am a God. Boom. That alone speaks to this apotheosis thing, right? I sit on the throne of a God in the heart of the seas. Tyre's right there on the sea line. But you are a mere mortal and not a god, though you think you are as wise as a god. Are you wiser than Daniel? Is no secret hidden from you? By your wisdom and understanding, you have gained wealth for yourself and amassed gold and silver and treasures. By your great skill in trading, you have increased your wealth. And because of your wealth, your heart has grown proud. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, because you think you are wise as a god, I'm going to bring foreigners against you, the most ruthless of all nations. They will draw their swords against your beauty and wisdom and pierce your shining splendor. They will bring you down to the pit. You will die a violent death. And in the heart of the seas, you'll die a violent death. Then you will say, I am Then will you say, I am a god, in the presence of those who kill you? You will be but a mortal, not a god. In the hands of those who slain you, you will die the death of the uncircumcised at the hands of foreigners. Um,
Jeez.
so, and what's interesting here is that if you read what Bible scholars have to say about Ezekiel 28, there's two things happening here. This guy was getting so big. His ego was getting so big, and I think his occult beliefs were getting so out of control. He was trying to do this thing, right? He was trying to become the Gibberim type of thing. And I also think that there's something else behind the scenes happening here. We're talking about ruling by proxy. There is a spirit trying to rule by proxy here through the king of Tyre, a principality. And Bible scholars say that. They will say there is, I didn't read the whole passage, but there's other indications here that this was not just meant for the king of Tyre. It was meant for this spirit that was kind of handling him and trying to rule through him. And I think that just circles right back to this Nebuchadnezzar Ishtar thing.
Right, right. It's interesting because I think even Psalm 82, if anyone's familiar with it, maybe kind of connects with what you were reading there. It says, God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. How long will you judge unjustly and show partially to the wicked? Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. I said, you are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High, but you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. I don't know. I find it like with this whole talk of the deification and the apotheosis, it never it never ends up how they expect it.
Yeah. You know what? I left out the best part here because I only read half of that passage. So there was a break right there after verse 10. And the Lord comes back in and says, this Son of man, take up lament concerning the king of Tyre and say this to him. So God stops after he says what he says up till verse 10 and says, oh, I've got another message for the king of Tyre. And this is what he says. You are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you. Does this sound like he's talking to the king of Tyre here or a higher entity? Sounds like a freaking higher entity to me. Every precious stone adored you: carnelian, crystallite, emerald, topaz, onyx, jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. For you were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. He's totally addressing an entity now at this point.
Absolutely.
Meant for the king of Tyre. And he goes on to say, so, I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. And just kind of goes on to, I reduce you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who are watching. So he's talking to one of these rule by proxy spirits here. And I love this passage. There's so much to unlock here.
Right. And it's said really that the person or entity that, is talked about in that is Lucifer, right? Pretty much.
Well, see,
I mean,
right. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying no. I'd say it's definitely Luciferian. And I think that I don't know that we know exactly who Lucifer is. And I think Lucifer has been represented by other evil entities throughout. I'm going to stop before I get myself in any trouble here.
No, right. No, I know. Because this does get kind of complicated because and again, if anyone has any thoughts, just drop it in the comments down below. But, I read all the comments and I try to just, I try to just companion with everybody. But the thing is he's just given so many different titles.
I think I can. I think
Plus,
I can answer your question actually in a second.
Semyaza, Zazel, we know that there are
Yeah.
players here, right? Because Satan has a third of the angels. There's a big group here that we're talking about, and I think they all work together. Go ahead.
Okay, I think I can answer that maybe,
Mm.
or maybe add to what I was trying to say. If you go to Isaiah chapter 37, this is a passage concerning Hezekiah and the king, what's his name, Sennacherib of Assyria, an Assyrian king. Hezekiah prays to the Lord for help in defending this invading Assyrian empire, and at the top of that is this king Sennacherib. And then Isaiah, son of Amos, sent to Hezekiah saying, so the Lord is giving Hezekiah another one of these messages. He says, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, because you have prayed to me concerning King Sennacherib of Assyria, this is the word that the Lord has spoken concerning him. Okay, now this is God speaking. She despises you. She scorns you. Virgin daughter of Zion, she tosses her head behind your back, daughter Jerusalem. Who's she?
Right.
Ishtar?
Sure. And you know what? I really want to do more shows on Ishtar, right? Like, because
this is another one of these spirits who's ruling over a king, and in this passage, it's literally saying she's androgynous. Essentially,
right.
it's saying she. So it's not Lucifer, or is it Lucifer? And is it Lucifer in a
Masquerading
female
as something else, possibly. And again, because I give it the benefit
It's
of the doubt.
Estrella, right? From earlier, Estrella, Ishtar.
Right.
I don't know who is it. It's some sort of a female dark entity. And I might, dude, people might come after me for this, but I'm just telling people what this says.
Well, I think too. I think the fallen. I think Satan and the fallen. I think that they understand both. They understand the duality of man and woman, and I think they understand it a little better than we do. And we're born into it, depending on what you are, male or female, because you have to understand, woman came out of man. So we're technically the nuclear family, right? Is technically shares a duality, right? To create another being. And so what I'm saying is pretty much, I think that these things, that their nature is masculine. I think that they're close to the image of God, and obviously you can get some different depictions of different angels and council members from in Revelation. They look monstrous, right? They're like weird, different created beings. But what I'm saying is I think that they know how to build an impression of both sides. Like, they know how to do man and woman, right? So maybe, if you know what I'm getting at with that.
Yeah. If you go deep in some of the texts and some of the extra biblical texts, what you see here is that this serpent seed idea that we get from Genesis 3:15 is not necessarily a new idea. It goes back to a dragon, some sort of a dragon that was been around since the beginning of humanity, at least. You see it. I think you see it in the Bible called Rahab. In Jewish texts, Rahab is a chaos dragon. It also seems to be a planet as well. In some of the Sumerian texts, they call it Tiamat. It's a chaos dragon, the primordial chaos dragon of the Tehom. Is like waters, right? But it's dragons, it's serpentine. And when you look into Tiamat, you start to see that there's connections to this Ishtar character. And it just seems like there's a female component to this that may not always represent itself as female. Some of the older pantheons in the Middle East, like I think Hittites did this. They had Ishtar under their male gods and listed under their female goddesses. So she was. Why is Ishtar represented in the male section and the female section? Well, because these aren't these they're not human. There's something androgynous to these spirits, right? And like this, I know, like I didn't want to get into this today at all because I know how hard this is for some people to stomach. It's even when you get into Lilith, you start to see that maybe she had a male counterpart called I think Samael. At least that's what Elvis Levi believed. So, and you see that in the garden if you want to go deep into like. Anyways, I'm getting in the weeds with that, but
Mm-hmm.
back to the serpent seed thing. Like if you go look at Nakash or Nahash, um, in Genesis, it was a being of light. What did God do? He punished this being of light and turned it into a little wingless, limbless dragon. Cursed it to slither on its belly and turned it into a little snake, a little dragon, right? So I
Right.
think the serpent thing is always there for sure. And I don't know, like, there seems to be a female presence involved with some of these old stories
I
too,
agree
like
with you.
Sophia,
I mean, look at Baphomet, right? I mean, Baphomet.
right?
I mean, it's you know, it's got it's got
Right.
female parts, right? And so there's this duality, and I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to break it down. We're trying to understand the nature and maybe point out an identity of it. But I'm with you. I think there is. I think there are these female influenced entities that that's the agency it wants to you know be known as, if that
Uh-huh.
makes any
Uh-huh.
sense. um and I think why that is because I think it plays a big part in that trinity, right? and
Yeah.
and and I think that you need the male, the female, in order to have the son. And so I think that's that trinity aspect of it, because we know that the other team likes to counterfeit the things that God created and had intended for. um and then they just go off crazy with it. It's almost like they're just immoral of it, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
What do you I wanted to ask you, so I
In
mean,
a second,
what
I want to tie
go
something
ahead,
up.
bring it in, bring it in.
Right now? Are you sure?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Um, we put a lot of big ideas on the table today, man. Thanks for hearing me
Hmm.
out. I know sometimes I say some stuff that's out there. I'm trying to get to where I can back all that up now. As soon as I say something, I'm trying to back it up with stuff. And like, I think that's what I'm hung up on this giants thing because I'm trying to get people to be open-minded about giants. And
Right.
there was one more aspect of the story that I wanted to bring out concerning Serpent Mound. And all this is backed up by Native American legend, the record. The Lenape Delaware tribe, in their legend, in their very meticulously kept oral record, the Alajiwi, who were giants, built Serpent Mound. Delaware, they also called them Talajiwi, which meant ancient ones. They were said to be 7 to 9 foot tall, red-headed, and have 6 digits. And when I saw that, I'm like, well, where have I heard that before? You know, well, 2 Samuel 21:20, I think it is, where you have a six-toed, six-fingered giant from Gath. And that's in the Middle East, but we're also seeing petroglyphs over here in Tennessee and other places in North America where you see the six-fingered or six-toed footprint carved into the rock. So I just wanted to toss that in because the natives themselves said the giants built Serpent Mound, and that was compelling to me towards what's with the
Hmm.
real deal going on here. And you know, the natives believed that the mound builders were products of the star people mating with natives. Where have I heard that before? Definitely Genesis 6.
Right.
So I just there's more, there's so many of these connections. That's what's making this thing so exciting for me. You start to see the connections between North America and the Middle East, and like you can't unsee it either. And like they were coming, I do think they were coming over here specifically to the Great Lakes to mine copper. I think that's why you see them so much in Ohio. There were so many of these giants pulled out of mounds in Ohio because they were in that region. And, there's a guy, I really want to talk to him on a show. His name's Chief Joseph Riverwind. He actually has a giant spearhead. I saw him show it on a live once, and he was holding it up. It's like huge, man. It's like this big, giant spearhead. They found it in the Great Lakes, where I say the Canaanites were mining this copper, right? Well,
Right.
Joseph Riverwind had the spear tested. They chipped a piece off of the end of it and had it tested, and it was made in the Middle East.
Really?
Yeah, but it was found over
So,
here in the Great
so
Lakes.
let's talk about this. I mean,
Only a giant could have used that thing, Stephen. It was too big.
oh yeah, and it's like when you because Goliath's spear was described, right? And when you actually look at it, I mean, it's like I don't even. It's probably at the head weight of it is probably 40 pounds. You can't. I mean, a lot of people can't even hold an AR with one hand.
Right.
Like how in the world? And so I want to know kind of how did they migrate over here, right? So if we were talking about the England coming over here, conquering the United States, and then the United States being established as a nation through independence from them, from where they came from. They came here and there were other people here. There were giants here, right? That's obvious. And I think America was chosen specifically because of what we've been talking about this whole show, right? There's significance to this land because of who was here before we got here. Now, how do you think they came to America? Do you think it was like through the Bering Strait, or if that's is that how I say it?
They were seafaring.
Okay, gotcha.
That's another thing that our public school history class totally misses. Like they don't even touch this. People were seafaring way before they're being given credit for. Way before.
Right.
To the point where, for me, it's like I see all these ancient sites over here. I investigate these ancient sites over here in North America, and it's clear that they were put there way before the Pilgrims got over here.
Right.
And all the sites, but they were seafaring. Like there was Phoenician, it was a Phoenician shipwreck that was found out near the Mississippi River, indicating they were here.
Wow.
There's another article. I always talk about this, and I need to find it. There was a Canaanite ship that was found recently. Let me see if I can find this, bro.
Wow.
And because the date on it is telling. Canaanite ship.
Yeah, and while you're finding that, there's so much scientific gatekeeping when it comes to these topics, right? If it doesn't mix with the mainstream narrative or whatever, it won't see the light of day, right?
All right. Yes. Here you go, brother. According to Antiquities Authority, the ship that they found recently belonged to the ancient Canaanite merchants and was the oldest shipwreck to be discovered in deep water as of June 2024. 2 jars were retrieved and dated to 1300 BC.
Wow.
There was something else in here but 1300, BC, the Canaanites were sailing the seas. I mean, it goes back way beyond that.
Yeah.
But that's just indication that, yes, they were out here. They were seafaring, man. They were seafaring.
Right. I even think in the textbooks today, it talks about that they came from Asia through Russia and then into America through Alaska. And this is how they came in down that route.
So one more thing about this. This thing was around 3,300 years old, just for people out there listening. This Canaanite ship. So 3,000, I'll just say 3,500 years ago, the Canaanites were sailing. And this ship in particular dates back to the late Bronze Age. What was fueling the Bronze Age? The copper that they were getting out of Lake Michigan. They were
Right.
coming over here to get all this
Wow.
copper to fuel the Bronze Age itself.
Wow.
So once you start to see certain things at all, everything falls in place. But yeah, like bearing straight and all that stuff, man, to answer that question, I think that these people were very advanced. And you got to think some of these people had a direct line to the priest kings with the Anunnaki blood, right? Like the Watchers themselves were given knowledge to these people's relatives.
Mm-hmm.
Like Azael, he taught them like metallurgy and like warfare and like how to use roots out of the ground for healing. They were taught how to do everything, including navigating using the stars.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. It's like it's in a way the seven sciences,
Absolutely.
right?
100%, man. And that you see that with the tablets they buried before the flood. Um, the line of Cain's son Enoch, who had Lamech, who had Jubal-Cain, Tubal-Cain, and Nama. The Masons hold this legend as well, although they won't put it up online anymore. You have to get in there. I think they reserve it for like members only. But the Masons' own legend is that Tubal-Cain hid or sealed tablets of knowledge underneath the Great Pyramid because they knew the flood was coming.
Yep.
And then after the flood, we know the Bible says there were giants in the land again. Those people
Right.
went and dug up the tablets and got their information that was stored for them by their ancestors. And there were similar tablets. Paracelsus talks about this. Seth, when they got off the ark, Seth went and dug up some tablets underneath Mount Ararat that were meant for Eve's seeds. So it's almost like there's two strands of information going at this point. They both came from the Garden of Eden. Adam was told some stuff. Of course, he told Cain, his son. Cain takes it and turns this information into what would become the seven sciences. But there's also a strand of that knowledge that was stayed in the other bloodline that would become the bloodline of Jesus
Yes.
as well. So there's
Yes.
two different forms of this old knowledge we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
God
Yep.
definitely has a plan for preserving his line.
Right. Right. And I know Gary Wayne gets into it. Right. He talks about Adam being an agrarian and the fact that you have to have some knowledge in order to take care of like very big plots of field and to take care of the animals, and there's science behind it. And I think that, God taught Adam things and Adam taught his sons things. And like you said, I think it was a part of Cain's agenda and his narrative against God to take God's knowledge and to twist it and mold it into, like you said, the seven sciences, in which his sons started to learn. And then later on, you may read in Enoch as well that even the fallen angels, what they were teaching was also that same idea of those kinds of sciences. And when you kind of step back and you really look at the big picture of it, I think that what the fallen angels were teaching man, it was, if they were teaching it to humans that were sinful, and in a way it would tempt them into falling into more sin, if that makes sense, right? So women with beauty, military defenses, right? Swords, shields, war, um, with all that stuff. I think it was a way for that. Like they knew that if they were to give this knowledge to these humans, that they wouldn't know really what to do with it, but their own nature would destroy them, or it would cause violence, it would cause chaos. And we know, from Genesis 6 that violence was very heavy in those days, and evil was in men's hearts entirely. And I think it played a big role with all that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the knowledge was bastardized and turned into something dark. Because I do think this is, we're in this war between light and dark here. Um, and once you get into some of these cults directly associated with that serpent seed mentioned in Genesis 3:15 again, it does start to get dark, and you start to see where this knowledge has been used for evil. And it's crazy, man. They had this. So I'm looking at the cult of Rapha, and I find out that they were worshiping Ashtoreth as well, Ishtar. So that ancient cult of Ishtar is another interesting one. They were into like temple prostitution, and they were lining up their rituals with like solstices and Easter. So I think, again, I'm not trying to tick everybody off, but I think a lot of our holidays have kind of come out of some of these darker places, right? Because Easter is Ostara, who's probably Ishtar. It just seems to be. It has the hall. Ostara,
Yes.
the Nordic goddess
It's
Ostara,
fertility.
she has a lot of the hallmarks of Ishtar, and the name sounds like so. And what they would do is so it's 9 months between spring equinox and winter solstice. So they would do the temple prostitution and impregnate temple prostitutes on Easter, and 9 months later they would sacrifice the newborn on winter solstice. And there's you could kind of see where this gets into like Christmas and Easter and the red egg is of Easter. The red egg is symbolic of child sacrifice. So I would suggest that maybe we have no idea how dark some of our holidays are.
Right.
There's a book I was looking at recently. It's called the Book of Hiram, and it talks about these sites in Northern Ireland where when they were excavated, they found these babies were being sacrificed in the cycle of Venus, who's Ishtar, all the way back to 4000 BC. So this all goes back to the ancient cults. And I don't know if I laid that out earlier, but Ishtar goes by many different names, and Venus is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
Astraea is Virgo, Ishtar is also Venus. So it all points back to this old cult of Ishtar. And even the cult of Rephaim, they even practice the cult of principles of Ishtar.
Right.
And
Right.
this all goes back to the bloodlines, man.
Yeah.
You have bloodlines that trace their lineage in a matriarchal way through the woman back to, in some cases, back to actual goddesses or even sirens. Like if you look at Luxembourg, it's like a little European country. The royal house of Luxembourg, who were originally Celts but moved to this landlocked country, they trace their lineage back to Melusine. She was the inspiration for the Little Mermaid. She's who's on the Starbucks logo.
Yes.
But you have a
Yes.
royal family who traces their bloodline literally back to this female goddess entity. And of course, if you look in the Book of Enoch, you kind of get an origin story for the sirens, right? They were the mothers of the Nephilim who were cursed to, I don't know, be turned into sirens or something. I'm hazy on it, but
That's interesting. I haven't heard of that actually. My whole concept in understanding, at least my speculation, right? With these cryptid type creatures, right? Mermaids, Bigfoot, uh, Dogman, all this kind of stuff. I feel like they're the children of the Nephilim.
mm-hmm.
And I say that because I make a comparison with, especially in Jude, where Jude is making a comparison where he's talking about the fallen angels that sinned in the days of Noah. And then in like manner was Sodom and Gomorrah having fornication with the same kind of idea. But then he also says they were having fornication with strange flesh. And so you look up that strange and it pretty much means like other. It's not human, right? So and then Paul talks about in the New Testament the different kinds of flesh, right? And there's fish, there's beasts, there's humans, there's like different kinds of flesh. And so what I'm thinking is if the Nephilim knew that a cataclysm was coming, right? And we're talking specifically in the antediluvian period. If they knew a cataclysm was coming, then I feel like in order for them to seek survival, they were to hybrid with animals that were adaptive to their environment. So, for example, if water was coming to destroy the earth, then let's try and make hybrids with sea animals. And so this
Mm,
may be like the idea of where we get Dogman. They're the Eliud that is described in the Book of Enoch, which is the sons of the Nephilim.
mm-hmm.
Um, and with that comparison that Jude's making with the antediluvian period, pre-flood and the flood, um, he's making that comparison with Sodom and Gomorrah, and we know that from that story that there were angels in the town, right? We know that angels were walking around and that people wanted to fornicate with them. So maybe there is something to that. I wanted to maybe get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it does seem like a lot of the origins for the cryptids in some way tie back into this whole broader story of Enoch and Genesis 6 and the story of the Nephilim and the Watchers. Um, you've got there's mention in Genesis of them creating chimeras, creating things that aren't supposed to be like merging like men with beasts
Like an
and
abomination.
abominations. Exactly. They even said that they were doing stuff with the plants. Like they were mixing plants together in a way that wasn't right. Like maybe trying to create like a plant cryptid or something. I don't know. Like you could get pretty wild with this stuff. But it does
I'm
say that they were
thinking
doing
I'm thinking
that.
of Gru from the
Yes, sir.
superheroes movies right
Right.
now. I am
Right.
Gru.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, man. And like, that's like you said, that's the word abomination definitely comes to mind. I mean, and I think that some of these other top watchers, these other like we'll call them fallen angels because I think most of them were fallen angels, were involved in this genetic experiment down here. And you even see it in some of the legends and lores at different places around the earth. If you go look at Botswana in a place called Sedilo Hills, they also call it the Mountain of the Gods. It's a region where the local people still have the legends that that's where the gods came down to earth and started making chimeras. It lines up with what we see in the Genesis 6 account before the flood. What exactly what the Bible says was happening. That's in these people's lore in Botswana. And guess who was also legend to be roaming around the Sedillo Hills? Ishtar in these people's legend. Inanna. She was said to be there. In fact, she had a lover named Dumuzi who she buried in this region. So yeah, it all goes. And by the way, Ishtar is in. I wasn't, by the way, I was planning on talking about her this much. It just seems to have come up, but she's also mentioned in the Bible for people out there listening.
Hmm.
She is acknowledged in the Bible.
Right.
Ashtar,
This is a
Ashtoreth.
spirit. This is a little
Right,
G god, right?
right, right. And Nebuchadnezzar, like I said, he built the Ishtar gate for Ishtar. On that Ishtar gate are chimeras. So it's like,
What?
yeah. So it's like this is all this stuff is
It's
inexorably
connected.
linked. It's all connected, man.
It
It's all
is.
connected.
It is. It's crazy, man. And we need to have these conversations to like we have to have these conversations. And it's crazy because sometimes, some people might give us some backlash or something or maybe not fully understand where we're coming from with all this, but we're really just trying to cipher the enemy, right? We're trying to decipher. And I think it's very important to do that because um just from a military perspective, right? Like strategics and operations and stuff like that. The more you know your enemy, the more you're less deceived, and the more you can, you know, be more successful with your moves, right? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I look at
And
all of this.
for sure, to go along with that thread there, the militaristic aspect of this. What prince has no army? Well, you have to have an army if you're a prince, or you're not going to be prince for very long. And I would suggest that the principalities in the Bible, these celestial entities, they're not human. You know, after the Tower of Babel, God sectioned off pieces of the Middle East and assigned them to certain principalities. These are like celestial princes that ruled over nations, exactly some of the stuff we've been talking about today, ruling by proxy, ruling behind the scenes through a king, a human king, but it's an actual entity running the show. That's a principality. That's a prince. Princes have armies. Their armies are going to look a lot different than ours. I would wager. I don't think they're using armies of humans. They're using armies of something else. They may not all be angelic either, you know,
Right.
angelic looking beings of light, whatever we compose in our mind that an angel looks like. You know, some of these guys I would think has at least looked into the possibility of engineering something, something else biologically, like biological robots. And I don't know, is that how we get gray aliens?
I mean, yeah, that's crazy too, right? Because you know, we a while ago, this was when the show kind of first was getting in its groove, and we had um, one on one podcast. You could check him out, but he's a really good dude, local to the area where I'm from, and uh, he was talking about homunculuses, right? He's talking about incubus and succubi, and all these different kinds of these different kinds of creations that occultists have been uh, longing for and seeking to accomplish throughout their lifetime. Some were successful, some weren't, and we know that some occultists even die in the middle of their rituals or in the middle of whatever seances that they're trying to do, and that's involved with a lot of this witchcraft. But the fact that you know, homunculus is basically this crafted, you know, engineered flesh suit,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they were trying to specifically create these things to bring in for these entities to take a vessel, if that makes any sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, the homunculus thing goes deep. Um, and I think vessel makes sense to me. Like you're creating an avatar for something that already exists to kind of come into. It's like something that exists that's not in our realm. You create it, give it an avatar here on Earth, and that thing can now come into this realm and come through like 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 if a baby doll, like creepy baby doll in a haunted house got up and started walking around, like that's something from something else coming into that thing,
Right.
inhabiting it as an avatar.
I mean, just look at us, dude. We're vessels.
Yeah,
You know, we're vessels.
sure, because we're spirit, brother. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Like there's no one like you in the entire world. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
from years in the past to the future, you are who you are.
Right, right, and and you see all these magical things that we can do when we're in a pinch, and I mean a real pinch, and I'm thinking about like out of death experiences. If you that's a rabbit hole, man. You go down and there are hundreds and thousands of people who have had this experience where they're laying on a hospital bed and they're floating above their body, and they know what their kids out in the lobby on a Game Boy, and they could tell you what they were doing, and that they were what they were drinking. And like there's one lady who was on the operating table, dead, legally dead, And when she came back into her body, she's telling the uh the doctor there's a red sticker with red text on top of the ceiling fan and like numbers or something. Like she knew exactly what it said. They got a
Yeah.
ladder. They got a ladder and went up there and looked, and sure enough, there's that red sticker with what she said was on it. It's like, come on, man, we're spirit.
Yeah.
That's the only way that works.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. And I've heard that NDE story before, and it's really mind-blowing because they even went up there, right? And they checked the location of what she described, and they found exactly what she was talking about. Um and
It's
it's
something that we're like able to tap into when we're in like very dire circumstances, I think. Maybe not every single time, but a lot of the times. And like I've heard stories from guys who are in war, you know, um, that had the same thing happen. Like there was a really good podcast that came out a couple years ago about this guy who was driving a truck in Iraq or something, and he knew that he was coming up on like either landmines and troops, and that they were just going to shoot him right out of his truck or something like that. And he has one of these experiences where um, he's still driving the truck, but he's up above the truck, watching himself drive it and helping himself navigate through these landmines on the road and all this crazy stuff. He has an out of body experience, although but it's because of the severity of the situation, right? It's such a demanding, it's demanding on the senses. It's high stress. So he has this, out of
right,
body experience.
right.
And I didn't do justice to the story, but like that's basically what happened. And it just blew my mind when I heard that.
And I'm even starting to kind of think that our consciousness, which is I think is our spirit, because we need consciousness to run this body, for this body to be able to work, right? Like if you think of the Frankenstein idea, like Frankenstein would never work because they didn't get the right formula, right? And that right formula is the spirit. But what I'm saying is I think that consciousness and our spirit is connected to our cells. I think it's connected to the smallest buildup that creates us. Especially with NDE stories, they talk about when they have these experiences, when they leave their body, they feel like they leave every piece of their body. They feel like every piece of them has left that vessel. And I've been really doing a lot of research with quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of theories out there that consciousness deals, at the quantum level and maybe not like the subatomic level, like that they would think, right? Like, electrons, atoms, and all this kind of stuff, but more at the cellular level. And it kind of resonated with me because, and I'm sure you've seen this video out there and maybe listeners as well, where at conception, where there's fertilization of the egg, right? There's a flash of light. Well, what happens after that, right? So the egg then moves down into the cervix, attaches to the uterus wall, and then all of a sudden cells just start dividing, right? Um, and I'm like, is it really that simple? Because people go about their day thinking of their spirit and their consciousness as just like something that fills the tank. You just don't really think of it much. Well, I'm actually thinking that it could be, you know like we're a part of every piece of our body, and we're in tune with a lot more than we think. I know
Oh
that can
yeah,
probably
the
come
Bible's.
off super new age, but
No, I get what you're
you get
saying,
what I'm
man.
saying?
For sure, yeah, for sure. We have to be open minded. There is a something magical is happening here for us to be one thing and able to be inside of this other thing, the shell, and for it all to be able to work in a cohesive way. If the Bible says that the life is in the blood, right? So there's something alchemical happening when the spirit's in the body and it's tied up with light, atoms, probably a little bit of electromagnetism and some other stuff that's just perfectly set just right for us to be able to function, just like just kind of like the way the universe seems to be. It's like, well, the sun's in its proper place. We're right where we need to be. And, I'm not going to get into the whole space argument because it was too late in the show for that, but
Sure, sure.
everything seems to be right with. So there's something to what you're saying, man. And like, honestly, I wanted to show you one thing because I pulled this up
Yeah. You can
while we were
screen share
talking
too
there.
if you want to.
Okay, I would, but this is actually on my
Okay.
phone, so I'm just
Gotcha,
gonna
gotcha. Cool.
I just want to go back to something earlier. Maybe tie a little bow on the conversation we had today. A guy named Jeff Wilson found a serpent mound picture and published it of a mound builder giant. And this is the one who was 7 foot tall but was missing beneath the knees. Like its legs were missing, but the rest of the skeleton was there. And I've seen the picture, and this, it's just more proof of all this stuff, right? Like, because it goes back to Putnam and all that. And like, I wanted to tell you, like, talking about like the magic of things, like a listener sent me this account about Serpent Mound. And this is wild. They said they took a stone from the cliffside next to Serpent Mound, and the stone amazed people for years as it held a magnetic charge. They said it was red sandstone and it held a magnetic charge. And to this day, it makes a compass wiggle, although the charge has faded a little bit. And, it's interesting because red sandstone is not something associated with Ohio. Like it was brought in from somewhere else. But I just think that speaks to the magic of this Serpent Mound place. This was a metaphysical kind of a place. This was a place like, yeah, there were giants there and obelisks and scales on the giant made of dolomite and all this weird stuff, but there's something beneath the surface in the land itself, right? That's doing some crazy alchemical stuff. So I just want to throw that in.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
and I found all these. Sorry, one more thing. I found all these crazy connections again to the Bible with the mounds over there, because over there you'll have Tel Aviv, places that start with that word Tel. Tel is means mound.
Oh wow.
So a lot of these cities over there are called Tel because they're built on mound sites. They're built on hills. Just like the founding fathers wanted to build our cities over here on mound sites. And a lot of the Canaanite temple locations are in some of these older cities that start with Tel, like Tel Azekah, Tel Sippar, Tel Lachis. That's an interesting one. These are all Canaanite temples that were found on mounds or hills.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And it's crazy too, right? Isn't the Vatican on 7 hills? Isn't Washington DC on 7 hills?
Well, they did that with the Vatican too. The Etruscans was a group of sorcerers who came in there and built the capital of Rome, where they built it. And they were using divination when they put that there. They found heads of people in the foundations of the Capitol in Rome, where they were cutting people's heads off. They were doing some sort of a shamanic ritual when they built that Capitol there. And that's why Jefferson named our Capitol building the Capitol building. He named it after the one in Rome that the Etruscans built. So they knew about all this stuff. They were reenacting a script almost,
Wow. It's crazy when you say that like that. That's wild, man. Tim, we've hit our mark, man. Is there,
No, we're good, brother.
Is there anything else you want to share with the audience, before we finish up here?
Well, no, I think we
we hit it pretty hard.
We hit it pretty hard, man. Yeah, we did.
We hit it hard. Man.
I've been on an Isaiah kick lately. Love that book. I encourage people to read it. I was looking in Isaiah 30, and something really stuck out to me, and we can wrap it up with this. You remember "This Is the Way" when the Mandalorian came out? Everybody was saying "This is
Yeah,
the
you see
way."
my lightsaber right here?
Yes, sir. I love it. I love it. Um, I and I started seeing that on the memes and all over the internet verse. I was sitting back and I was like, there goes Star Wars again, reviving this very ancient mystical concept. But this time it happens to also be biblical. It's in the Bible. And Isaiah 30:20 says, um, your teacher will not hide himself anymore, but your eyes shall see your teacher. When you turn to the right or turn to the left, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." It's one of the
Wow.
most powerful verses in the Bible. If you can pray and meditate on that verse, is spiritually and alchemically unlock that verse, bring it to life, it's a game changer.
Right on. Right on, man. No, I appreciate you sharing that, man. And for the audience that's still hanging out with us, man, where can they, find your content and support you the most?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Stephen. Great stuff, man. I always love talking to you, brother. Even
Yeah, dude.
before we hit record, it's been great. Yeah. I'm Tim Constantine. My show is Sixth Sensory Podcast. I'm on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Patreon, and Instagram. And thanks again, man. It's been
Yeah,
great.
dude. No, it's always a pleasure having you on, man. Dude, you're one of the brothers, and it's always a good time. It's always, I mean, a wealth of knowledge when you come on because you share things that I'm ignorant to, and I enjoy that the most because this is a journey not just for me, but for the viewers and the listeners that are, you know, supporting me and all of the other shows. It's a fun time, and it's important to talk about this stuff and have these conversations because this isn't your typical podcast, talking about culture and all this other kind of stuff or whatever. It's different. It hits different. We get into the thick of things and we get into the meat. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's always a pleasure having you on, man. It's a blessing, and I love it every single time. And obviously, it's not the first. It's not going to be the last. We're going to have you on plenty more times, man. I really enjoy it every single time. So, thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna get you on my show too, man. I look forward to it.
Oh man, that's going to be fun. That's going to be exciting, man. And I mean, that's I'm grateful just to hear that and have that opportunity, man. So, but folks, if you've tuned in with us this month, this long, we appreciate you. We love you, and we wouldn't mind if you hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends, drop a comment down below about the things we got into. If there's anything we didn't mention, or if if you're in contrary to the things we talked about, just let us know. We'll have a conversation about it, and um, that's what we do here, man. We're people at the end of the day, and we're patient. We like to hear people out. And you could also support us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Spreaker. And while you're there, just drop a 5-star review and follow, and we deeply appreciate that. But Tim, with all that said, man, I'm going to close us out in a quick little prayer. So, Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. Thank you for supporting us, supporting the shows that we do, and just giving us the influence to dig deep into these conversations and these topics that are many people are ignorant to, but that's why you're using us. And I pray that you just continue to guide us on our journey, continue to keep us safe, continue to bless us, Lord. And we love you and we thank you for your sacrifice in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks again, brother. It's always a blessing.